Hello, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Psyched. I'm your host, Sule A. Joseph, a counseling psychologist by profession. On today's episode, as we've been doing for the past few episodes, we're going to touch on a bit of a controversial topic today. But before we get into that, my favorite segment, Psyched to Know.
Psyched to Know, brought to you by Sule Joseph and Associates. Sex addiction is often conceptualized as the compulsive engagement in sexual acts without any regard for the negative consequences that may arise. This may be understood as faulty wiring in the limbic brain system concerned with instincts and moods. In 2019, the World Health Organization has included compulsive sexual behavior disorder as a subset of impulse control disorder in the new International Classification of Diseases, Volume 11.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Welcome back to Psyched. I'm your host, Sule A. Joseph. Joining me today, after a long vacation away, as a matter of fact, perhaps the person went on a sabbatical maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen her in a very long time. It's been some time. But she was a regular on the program, usually giving us with up-to-date, relevant information and the truth and facts about matters, every and anything pertaining to, you guessed it, sex. That's our resident sexologist, Onika Henry. Onika, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Sule. Good to be back.
It's been a hot minute since we've had you, but welcome back. Today, I know we're going to have a controversial conversation because for the professionals among us, those in our field, it's divided. Some people don't believe in it at all. Some people do believe in it, and being a person who has treated or has to interact with clients who've had some similar type of issues, I would definitely say I'm a believer in. I'm on that side. But today we're having a conversation not just about addiction, but sex addiction. So before we delve into sex addiction, let's first get an understanding of what's addiction. When we talk about addiction, what are we talking about?
So for me, addiction is any situation in which a person is unable to control themselves. They keep repeating behaviors or patterns of behaviors that can lead to them neglecting their health, neglecting their personal care, neglecting other interests. And so it gets to the point where it's as if their very life does not matter and they're not thinking about consequences at all.
Okay.
That's it in a nutshell.
All right. But then can sex do that? Isn't sex this healthy thing that we all have? We all have urges. We all sometimes, that time of the month for some women, you have this period when they're ovulating where they get crazy, horny, and they feel that drive and impulse to have sex. Women have that period, men have that period too. It's called the entire month, but for women, it's a shorter period. Isn't that just natural?
So yes, and that's why the whole term or the idea of sex addiction is problematic. So there's an ongoing debate in the mental health community about exactly how do you define compulsive sexual behavior? Because it's not always easy to define when sexual behavior becomes problematic. And it's not always easy to define because values and biases, may show up. And so the way that the field has dealt with this is that there actually is a divide. There are those who refer to a situation where sex can be described as problematic. It's interfering with your life. You are making decisions and choices that are putting your health and perhaps the health of others at risk as in your partners, where some may file it under compulsive sexual behavior or obsessive compulsive sexual behavior, and others may describe it as an addiction. Yeah. What has been happening in the field is that folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this? And therefore, how is that affecting your nervous system and what's happening in your body and how you respond when you are stimulated in a particular kind of way? And so that's kind of where we're at. And the interesting thing about addiction, when we talk about addiction treatment, it typically involves abstaining from the thing that the person is addicted to. But sex is a basic appetite drive. So abstinence doesn't really work, and it's not meant to be a long-term. You can't expect someone to stay away from sex their entire life when it is part of what makes you a holistic, well-rounded person, meaning that sex is part of your well-being. It's an essential part of what makes you healthy.
Well, I'm going to put on my religious hat here. Let me put on this. Take off the psychologist hat and put on the religious hat.
Right.
And let me say that perhaps this is a spirit, an evil spirit that possesses people, this spirit of sex and spirit of physical need and desire. And it's a spirit that possesses people. And it stems from all you professionals out there saying that it's okay to masturbate. So after touching yourself and so on, this triggers or invites this evil spirit and causes now you to want to constantly, you've opened this Pandora's box, and now you constantly need sex to fulfill this evil spirit, as it were.
Oh my. So I'm not a theologian. I do not know that I can accurately respond to that. What I can say, however, as someone who is also trained as a sex and faith facilitator, specifically for Christian communities, is that one, being very mindful and careful about how folks are interpreting scripture. There is nothing in scripture, as far as I know, and once again, I am putting in the context that I am not a theologian, but I do have training specifically in how sex and sexuality is treated or viewed, or how biblical verses are used to weaponize sex. That aside, there is nothing in the Bible that clearly says that masturbation or self-pleasure or solar pleasure is wrong, and that it brings about any or creates a gateway for evil spirits to enter. I have not seen any backup for that. So I'm using that as a foundation and context to say what I'm going to say next.
Okay.
Those of us who are clinical sexologists who work in the area of dealing with sexual issues or dysfunctions, etc., we actually use solo pleasure, aka masturbation, as a way of training the body, of becoming deeply aware of how your body functions and how to use specific techniques like breathwork, movement, meditation, etc., in order to bring the body to a place where you have more control over what happens in the body and over how you respond to the body. And so solo pleasure it has to be a very essential part of that.
Okay. So this is you as a professional. This is you as a professional saying, go out there and touch yourself freely because you're not going to invite evil spirits. As a matter of fact, this is a good thing.
Yes, this is so the way athletes train their bodies to prepare for sports.
Bathroom Olympics then, this is bathroom Olympics or bedroom Olympics.
There we go. You can see or you can use or you can view solar pleasure masturbation as training for the body, training for the soma. When I say body, I'm also including the brain.
Okay. So we've gotten that out of the way. How do we recognize if you may indeed be suffering with a sex addiction versus just being someone with a healthy sex drive? Because I may be on work, having a stressful day, and then, maybe I start feeling for my partner. Maybe I want wifey come over or something. Maybe I'm having fantasies about doing it on the job or in the office. Am I a sex addict if I fantasize about having sex in the workplace? Does that now make me where is the line? How do I?
Right, and that's the thing. Where is the line? Because what is considered normal in one culture or in one group may be considered completely abnormal for someone else in another culture. So generally, this is what professionals in the field say. So symptoms may include things like repetitive sexual activities that become the central focus of your life to the point of neglecting your health and personal care. As I mentioned before, you're neglecting other things that were interesting to you before. You're neglecting activities. You're neglecting your responsibilities. And even as you make numerous attempts to significantly reduce your behavior, the behavior continues despite or in spite of adverse consequences. And even as you continue to indulge in those activities, you're deriving little or no satisfaction from it. Yeah, so you have this impulse, you have this urge, you keep repeating it, you want to satisfy it, but every time you do try to satisfy it, it doesn't feel as satisfying. And so there are literally similarities between being addicted to a foreign substance that you're bringing into your body. And once again, as when you have addiction to substances, your behavior causes distress or significant impairment in your personal life, in your family life, your social life, and other areas of functioning. So there's deep distress. And those deep distresses can sometimes be related to moral judgments, aka religion, and disapproval about the sexual impulses or the sexual urges or behaviors. Yeah, so...
Well, as you said that, I directly thought of a client because in a situation, because that was the situation, that their religious beliefs, that they had strong religious beliefs, weren't aligning with their deep urges. And so what would happen would be that they would try to hold off and fight it and fight it and fight it. And then there would be this binge, a period of a binge, right?
Yep.
Afterward, there would be deep guilt and function and issues of depressive-like symptoms and so on because of the guilt out of this binge. And then they would try to hold out for long periods again and hold out and not do it and try to talk themselves out of it. And then time would elapse and then there'd be a binge. And again, the guilt. So it was this repeated cycle and not able to function, being slaved to this specific cycle. Right? And
there's guilt and remorse.
And remorse, yes. Guilt and remorse. So for persons at home who may be viewing, if there are these deep desires that result in action that eventually often causes a cycle of that functioning and then remorse and guilt, then those are some of the symptoms they can look for if they may be suffering with a sex addiction. Yeah, is that what we're saying?
Yes. And there's still the term maybe, because once again, there is debates about
correct.
About how that actually works in the brain and whether if you remove that sense of moral judgment that this person has, whether they will feel badly about it, whether they will simply be able to manage it because it's part of normal for them.
Right. Well, then that brings me to the idea. I didn't intend to ask the question, but it came to me, so I'm going to ask it. We already crossed the line of controversy, so we go in full blown, right? Now there's a term that we use in Trinidad and Tobago frequently, where we refer to somebody as a hoe. Well, out of the word whore, right, a working woman, we refer to somebody as a hoe. Now in this instance, I am not gendering the word hoe, although we often, when we think of hoe, we think of a female who is promiscuous. I am now just using it and referring to the behavior and the functioning that we assign to it, not the gender. So you could be a male hoe in this instance, right? As a matter of fact, usually that's how people refer to men in the service, right? In Trinidad, right?
Yeah, that's a popular belief, servicemen are generally, considered to be.
Right. So I'm going to use
that word.
Correct. So I'm going to use that H word. Right? If we strip that down to the functioning of a promiscuous behavior by male or female, right? Don't we still then have to examine? Don't we still have to examine the root causes behind that function, or at least if the functioning disrupts, if that behavior disrupts their functioning? Because I'm thinking here, nobody thinks of somebody who lives that lifestyle as someone with a sex addiction. So it's not seen as a medical, it's not seen as a medical or a psychological issue. It's just seen as a lifestyle, as a particular lifestyle that's been chosen and selected.
Right. Yes. And so for me, the key element or the key difference is that person having choice. They decide, this is how I want to live, as opposed to I can't help myself. And once again, that could get a little tricky as well. So maybe I can give another example for someone who likes chocolate ice cream. Yeah, and they eat chocolate ice cream all the time. It's a habit. It's something that it brings them pleasure. Right. And because it brings them pleasure, they do it really often.
Right.
So for me, somebody who has a very high sex drive, to match what you were describing, could be, that chocolate ice cream, that sex is like that chocolate ice cream for them. It brings a whole lot of pleasure, a whole lot of joy, and so they indulge in it often, as much as they can, which is different from someone who begins to risk life and limb, who begins to risk health, who is fighting this impulse that they're very uncomfortable with and that they feel is out of their control. And so for those of us in the mental health field who are trying to decide whether a pattern of sexual behavior is addictive or not, we need to look at those fine points. Has it gotten to the point where this person is neglecting themselves, neglecting their health, and it's causing distress not just to them but to family members? As opposed to, this is my lifestyle choice, I enjoy doing this, I'm protecting myself, I am being very intentional and decisive about the partners I choose to have sex with and where I enjoy having sex, etc. Is that helpful?
It does to an extent, because then I know that we are dancing on a thin line on determining whether on determining that this is a choice by design, is a desire, or it is an impulse. Right? So I know that we're dancing on that thin line, because then when we throw in things like we start giving considerations to nymphomania, for example. When we talk about nymphomania and so on, where does that fall on the scale of impulse, ability to control? Is that person then suffering with an addiction? Is that sex? Because if we adhere to nymphomania, then to me, then we are not too far. We're basically on the same line with sex addiction, which should be separate and apart from a chosen specific lifestyle, which would fall more in line with the H word that you seem averse to, to pronouncing, but that we use in Trinidad quite frequently and loosely here, right? And of course, is usually designed to connote some bad values that we assign to the person. So somebody chooses a promiscuous lifestyle, that we assign that this negative terminology and place a value-based bias on that person's sexual choice.
Yeah, and it goes a little bit deeper than choice, I believe, or at least for me, in the way I see it. All of us have a particular personality or physiology when it comes to our erotic energy and our sexual energy. There are some of us who are asexual, who have no urge at all to have sexual intercourse with other persons, or that urge is very rare.
Right.
And then those of us on the other end of the spectrum who we tend to call the nymphomaniacs, who have a very high erotic energy, high sexual drive, high sexual enjoy, high sexual desire. That's simply part of their physiological makeup. That has nothing to do with moral values. It is simply, this is how their body functions. This is what their body enjoys and requires. And therefore, in partnerships, often they have to find a way to negotiate to get those sex needs met with a partner who may have a much lower sexual desire. But it is part of the diversity of human beings.
So whether we accept it, we don't accept it, but for the sake of this argument, let us say we've accepted that maybe the viewer at home is hearing a lot of what we're discussing, hearing some of the symptomologies and saying, listen, this applies to me, this is where I'm at. What do I do next? I have a high sex drive, I think about sex all the time. One partner generally is not enough. Is not enough. Maybe I need excitement, I need change, I need difference. And maybe all I am thinking is, I need to get this demon out of me. I need to go to church. I need to get cast out. When the hormones start kicking in, I probably need to strap myself to a chair like a werewolf. What do I do? How do I treat with this? I feel like maybe you're feeling as though this is a sickness and an illness. You're not fitting into the society. How do I deal with it?
Well, so first, I would suggest that the person sits down and takes stock of why they think it might be problematic. What are they losing out on? What is being lost? Is there any damage being done unto whom? And is this damage, or is this concern or distress a really serious one? Does it really have an impact on their sense of well-being, on their sense of safety, on their sense of simply being able to be who they are? If that is still a confusing or unclear process or reflection, they're probably going to have to seek out the services of a mental health professional who can help them navigate what they're going through.
Right.
Usually, if someone has a serious problem with sexual behavior, so if it's out of control, or they feel it is out of control, or if they're seeing themselves as an addict, compulsive sexual behavior or sex addiction is usually an escape from other problems. And so most times it's a symptom of a deeper or a larger mental health or emotional health issue that's happening. And sex is simply the outlet. Sex is simply one way in which they deal with it. And so there's often underlying causes of loneliness, of depression, of anxiety, of childhood abuse, of abuse during adolescence. And for many folks, taking back that power and feeling as if they're in control happens only during those acts of sexual behavior that seems, out of control or beyond what makes them comfortable. Did I say that in a way that makes sense?
Yes, you did, because what registered to me was I was thinking back on another case where a person's first sexual experience was a traumatic one. Mm-hmm. It was very traumatic. It was not consent. It was not a consent-based experience, and it was by somebody familiar to them and family-based and so on. And that trauma, as it were, from that from that experience, has now almost linked. They have linked that trauma to sexual experience, and it's not that it has turned them away from it, but for them to enjoy any kind of sexual experience, it must almost be, it has to be dangerous and almost taboo.
Right, and that is a nervous system programming. That is not the person being immoral. It is a nervous system programming that has in their body since that time, because it has not been released or dealt with or unwound, as we say. There's some armoring around their sex life. And one of the questions I often ask clients who have come to me with the concern that they have, an addiction or their sex lives are out of control, is what do you get? What do you experience? How do you feel when you're in those moments of engaging in these acts that you feel are problematic? And they can describe for you how it makes them feel. And so the next step is how do we get you to feel that feeling without putting yourself at risk? How are we able to give you that sense of whether it is empowerment or control or feeling love or feeling wanted, whatever it is? How can we get that in healthier ways? How can we get that through sexual acts that are healthier for you?
Okay.
Because there's always an attention, there's always something that they feel or they want to feel or they get out of it. So looking at what are you getting out of it? How is this serving you?
Right.
And could we find at the root of the matter what it is you're looking for, what you feel, and find other more positive outlets for you to get that same sense of empowerment or control or feeling loved and wanted.
Right. So essentially, if it's about adrenaline and the adrenaline rush, how to do that without putting your life at risk? How to safely get that same adrenaline rush without putting your life at risk?
Exactly.
Essentially.
Exactly. Not putting yourself in financial constraints because you're paying for a whole lot of porn, or you're paying sex workers exorbitant amounts of money every other day. You know what I mean? So how can we still give you that rush without damaging your sense of self? You're feeling a sense of unworthiness and distress.
Now, Onika, I want you to send a specific message as we looking to close. Not that because I battle hard for men. I know that I feel as though men are not always represented well. But in this particular instance, especially when we're talking about sex, I feel like men generally get a pass. And I want a message. What message would you send to women who feel as though they have very high or intense sexual drives and are worried or concerned about how society will see them? Or how do they exist in a world that is okay or will give a man a pass on being sexually explorative and so on, but not a woman? So what message would you leave with women who may be struggling?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, in my personal opinion, I think we need more sexually liberated women. Women who are able to say what they want, know what they want, understand their bodies, at the same time set boundaries for sexual interactions and make them feel good, in which they are safe, in which they can be themselves. So I think we need more women who are outspoken, who are sexually liberated, and who are making choices about their sexuality and their sexual health in ways that make them feel good and that feel empowered. So the message is, find community. Like, that's the best thing I can come up with now, so that you know that you are not alone. Find community, find groups, find other sisters, other women who understand what it's like to have a sex drive that seems to be out of sync with what society is expecting or believe, and know that that belief is not grounded in any kind of scientific truth. Know that it has nothing to do with who you are as a human being in terms of your worth or your worthiness. And as a social space, we have a lot of unlearning to do about what sexuality is and what healthy sexuality is.
You've said that.
Find your tribe.
You've said that so much better than I could, because I was going to say that we're still backwards as a society. So you've said it so much better than I, eloquently. You've said it very eloquently, and a message to the women out there who perhaps feel as though this episode has spoken to you. Find your tribe. You are not alone. Thank you very much for joining us, Onika. Thank you. For those persons who want to get onto Onika, or perhaps have some further questions, she is on social media. You can feel free to, they can feel free to reach out to you on social media. Is there an email address or somewhere they can get you at? You want to give us?
Sure. So if you want to email, simple ohenrybusiness@gmail.com. It might be easier to find me at O'Henry Consultancy on Facebook and send me a message there, and I will follow up. And also just to let folks know that part of how I interact with folks who are looking for information is that I do, when I have the time, I do free 15-minute consultations. And sometimes that's all somebody needs to figure out what their next step is.
Right.
So feel free to reach out. And I can share my WhatsApp contact number as well.
Okay.
For work, 381-3049.
That's 381-3049?
Correct.
All right. Lovely. Thank you for joining us. Guys, that was a controversial conversation that we had yet again. All right. I'm expecting pitchforks and stuff pretty soon to be outside of the studio. But until next, and thanks, Onika. See you. Until next week, people at home, next week, please God, join me right back here on the WESN family. Same time, same place on WESN. Until then, stay psyched.